Good evening and welcome to Separated by Water, fans of English teams on this side of the REC. My name's Colin Campbell and I'm a bamboozled Tottenham season ticket holder at the minute. My co-host is Paul. Paul, how are you?
I'm good. As I said last week, missing the football, but we're getting there. Tonight we're going to talk about all things Chelsea with two new guests. Derek's not a new guest. Derek's been on with us before. Derek, how are you?
Not too bad, Paul. All good. Thanks.
Good.
Man. Looking forward to it here.
Good. Looking forward to having the chat with you. And Daniel, welcome. How are you?
Thanks a million, gents. Appreciate you having me on.
No bother at all. Daniel, you actually reduced the average age of our contributors by more than 50%. So welcome. And your young voice is very welcome.
You're very welcome. Very welcome.
Yeah. So tonight we're going to talk about all things Chelsea. We have to talk about Ange Postecoglou, Thomas Frank, whether the deal's done from coming to Spurs or not. And we'll also talk about Nottingham Forest sending a letter to UEFA about Crystal Palace being kicked out of the conference, not the conference, Europa League. Doesn't lie well with me, but we'll talk about that later on anyway. So, as I said, welcome, Daniel. Daniel, whenever people come on the show, the first thing we always ask them is, you support Chelsea, you're a lad from Dublin, why Chelsea?
Well, it's actually a great question because you'd normally think a young lad from Dublin or even just Ireland in general would be like a United fan, Liverpool fan. There are a few Arsenal, but not as many. So my dad is English, so I am half English. He's from London, so he would have been going to the Chelsea matches in the 70s and 80s when we were poor, when we were really bad. So it was always kind of meant to be, really. I got my first jersey when I was like 3 or 4. I started going to games at the Bridge when I was like 4 or 5 even. I was the mascot in the FA Cup final in 2009. And I've been going to kind of games up until about 2018 was the last kind of game I went to. So, and then I've been watching them kind of ever since. So that's been my journey to following them.
Good stuff. We talk about the conflict of interest, and I think what we need to get into maybe first, and Derek maybe lead for us in this, is about the Todd Bowley's involvement with Vivid Seats. Now, I know that we went into a partnership with Ticketmaster, I think, for 2 years anyway. But is there any update on that, Derek? What's going on with the Ticketmaster or the Vivid Seats situation with Todd Bowley?
Not really. They come out with a denial, and Todd Bowley didn't make any comment at all. But Chelsea Supporters Trust have been sort of very big on it. I'm a member of the Supporters Trust, and they've been asking questions, and it looks terrible. The whole thing about it when they're trying to play for everybody, and this comes across. The awful example I was over at the United match on Friday night, the very last match, sitting beside a guy from New York, and he paid £622 for his ticket. And I thought, I said, where did you get it? This was on a website. Now, he didn't specifically say which website, but this sort of thing's going on. And he could afford it, mind you, but that's not the point,
That's not the point.
I heard the prices went up again this year, didn't they? I heard the prices for the season tickets have went up again.
Yeah, my season ticket, there's general admission season tickets and the hospitality season ticket, and I'm part of the hospitality because that was the only way I could get a season ticket 3 years ago. So all our prices don't reflect the rest of the ground, but we are that bit dear. But my own season ticket went up by about 8 or 9% from last year. So I think generally across the board in the other stands it was 4, 5, 6%. With it, they've given a wee bit and taken away with others. Have increased the concessionary age along with the state pension age to 66. So one of the guys I know, he's going to fall out of the concessionary into our bracket, But they've given youth, maybe a more Emerson youth, 22 to 25 year olds, some kind of leeway into it or with cheaper tickets. So, but overall, it didn't look good, and it's still not comfortable. It hasn't been resolved. We want, the club are saying they're going to, cut down the ticket touting. It hardly looks good when somebody within the club is potentially has a hand or involvement to a degree in something like that there. But you're right with the Ticketmaster. That's been brought in now. So we're going through that
Yeah.
system, and it hasn't reached its conclusion, but it does look like a system potentially cut out in a lot of time. It seems a lot more stricter, even for the likes of myself, gifting tickets or whatever. There's a lot more, to it now. The follow up who exactly sitting in your seat, where that type of, which is probably good. But the proof will be in the pudding when we see when it all develops.
Yeah.
But I think
Derek,
idea is a good idea.
Just to tie that down a wee bit, Derek, you're considering renewing your season ticket at the minute. I assume you're going to.
Yes.
How much you've done that? How much will that be?
Yes, my season ticket this season is 1,900.
And that entitles you to sit and watch Chelsea. Is there anything
19 Premier League matches.
Yeah.
And 4 cup matches, domestic cup matches. And how to break that down is the first 2 home games of the League Cup and the first 2 home games of the FA Cup. However, as you well know, it could be drawn away to somebody in each round, so that could drop off. You just don't know. So the talk up to, it doesn't entitle me to Champions League tickets, but I will get what they call first bite of my seat for. This season, the Conference League tickets were, believe it or not, £60 for people who didn't have it within their package. So I didn't make any of those matches, obviously.
Well, okay, I'd not do the maths. That amount divided by 19, is good or is it not? And it's a personal decision. And I know, coming on a term you'd used there a wee minute ago, just to come yourself, you have to fly over to London. Already, it was really going over. You mentioned the term gifting. How difficult is it for you to swap or sell on your ticket to somebody else when you can't get to a match?
Well, there's 2 ways. If you can do it through the ticket exchange, whereby the club take responsibility for selling your ticket. Last season one was as fruitful as the season before, and maybe that's because people were just voting with their feet. They didn't like what they were saying, So 3 of my tickets remained unsold this season, whereas the previous season I was at 10 matches and sold the other 9. So it's it's just. But the gifting idea is entirely, we are allowed to what they call gift tickets to somebody, but you have to name them and have to be sure that they're not an away supporter, etc. So so that's the way I'm looking at gifting and putting them on exchange as a combination this season, and to try and ensure that they get sold. The one wee negative point that I've heard, and it hasn't confirmed, normally when I sell my ticket, the club send me back the pro rata amount for that ticket into my account within 7 working days of the match. The suggestion is that you won't get it, and we put into your account, your Chelsea account, that you can use it to buy next season's ticket. Personally, for me, that doesn't. I like getting the money in because I could have a flight to book or accommodation to book that week, and that money coming in sort of it turns around, So I know that it's not money lost, but I prefer to have the money up front so that I can utilize that.
I understand.
Flights, etc. Accommodation, But then just the season with the Champions League, and while there's a renewed enthusiasm from members, and So as I said, I'll know better in the next few months. Coming how it's looking and how it's going to go.
Well, I've been very complimentary to the Spurs arrangement, and yours seems to getting closer to me. Well, I'm a season ticket holder, so I actually pay half price. But, we can sell ours through the club, or we can gift it, as you've said, which means that you nominate people who get then a client reference number, and the ticket is automatically transferred to their phone, and the money's collected by their money goes to Spurs, which is fine, and then comes to us. I get half of it, and Spurs get the other half because I only pay half price. And I think it works in a few ways. One is that it is quite easy to do. Even I can do it. And the other one is it does protect the Spurs fans in 2 ways. One is that Spurs fans are getting a chance to get a ticket, and the other one is that I'm not able to rip somebody off. For 300 for the Arsenal match or 500, whatever it may be. And I think in the bigger picture, it's all good. So hopefully they're going that way. Because, this podcast is about people here going over to see their teams. And we obviously want to make sure there's many people get over as possible and they're not ripped off. So that's pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that the club offered a response, basically saying that they've partnered with Ticketmaster to combat ticket touting. And whenever they asked the fans, only 17% expressed confidence, which is a very low number in the tickets. Anyway, that's good. That's the tickets talked about. We'll move on to transfers, Colin. Will we dig into that now? Really?
Yeah. Just a question to start with Daniel, really. I mean, saying you've been transfer movements at Chelsea, which are quite busy. I think, I'm not sure what the outcomes are since the end of the season. Is there much going on outwards and inwards? Anything to report?
Yeah, well, it's like most transfers at Chelsea. I feel like we're linked to every player under the sun, but how many of them actually come through is a different question. So we've had actually some news today about Gittins and Mignon. Both of them ain't coming. I think I'd mentioned it in the pre-chat there that the club were kind of hassling over 4 million for Mignon. I think it could have even been a bit less, 2 or 3. And the same with Gittins. It was about, within that, 2 to 5 million range that they wouldn't pay up front. Now, look, I understand it's a weird window because it's open from, I think it was open from the 1st to the 10th, and then it closes and then it opens again the following week. So they could easily just go after that, which I hope. I'm kind of more, leaning. I'd rather we get Mignon than Gittins, to be honest. I think we need that caliber of player within the team, especially in the goalkeeping position, because we've got a lot of options there, but not a lot of quality there. So that is a position I think. Look, it's like for a keeper his quality, Milan are only demanding 20 million. Like they'd be happy to pay 20 million for a player coming from Brazil that we've never heard of, that will probably never play. But for a keeper,
that's very true.
He starts for the French national team. He's been one of the best goalkeepers in the world for the last 2 or 3 years. I feel it's great value, even at the amount that they want. So, and it's the same with Gittins. I think. Yes, sorry, go on.
Oh no, I just think what you said, like Daniel Levy tactics here. Getting the thing done on principle and then losing it over 2 or 3 million.
It's very frustrating because we haven't been used to that.
Yeah, I mean, I was reading, for me, the excellent Martin Samuel on the Sunday Times. It said that Chelsea have 9 goalkeepers on their books. Yeah. I mean, that's remarkable. And then one good, probably they need, but what they do is they need one good one.
That's what I mean. Like we have that many keepers, and we still are looking for one. That just speaks volumes of how poor the transfer strategy has been, or certainly that's what I think.
I've said to the boys, Daniel, before that I would like to see Petrovic getting a full run out next season.
Absolutely.
Somewhere at Strasbourg. Well, I haven't seen him, but the reports, player of their season, and he's been very good. So why not give him a chance? Because you can feel at Stamford Bridge, you can feel the collective ooh when the ball goes back to Sanchez and the nerve and the transfers to the players. The players can hear that. And I convinced it cost the 2 goals last season. The panic that set in. But
I think it was nearly 4 or 5 goals.
Yeah. I was at the Spurs Chelsea match when we went 2 up. I should have left him, but I said to the guy, well, this keeper's dodgy as hell. And Curacell, whatever you call him, he was panicking, and they were there for the taking, but naturally Spurs couldn't close the deal. But as a Premier League goalkeeper, God love him, man, I hate criticising people. I call them clowns. I'm not attributing names to him or name calling. What I'm saying is that his demeanour was sort of exude either confidence or nervousness. He exuded nervousness, and that made the back 4 tighten up a wee bit, and had not Spurs collapsed and Chelsea taken over, the headlines might have been different, but I can see why Chelsea are doing that. Anyone else you want? Any wish list players?
My big one would be Victor Osimhen would be me the one. I'd love them to pay his wages. Just go out, and forget about the Brazilian couple of guys. Just leave that and go for Osimhen. I know he's being greedy and everything, but I would make an exception for him. And he's the only one out if he wanted that money. But it's not going to happen. I don't think. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. See the Gittins deal. I was just looking there. You have offered 42 for him, and they're asking 55. Assuming they get that done, how do you see? Daniel? We'll start with you. How do you see him fitting into your squad?
Well, look, to be honest, I feel like in the wide positions we probably will need to strengthen. I think the Mudryk situation doesn't look like it's clearing up anytime soon. I think the fact that it's gone on for so long means he's suspended. We just haven't heard of it. So that'll be him gone for at least probably a year, two. So, he's not going to be playing, so he needs to be replaced. I've heard rumours of Madueke potentially going to Newcastle for, I've heard like 50, 60 million. I'd take that for him, and then we'd need to replace him. I think he'd be a good squad addition. Personally, I don't think he should be the main guy we're looking for to play left wing. I think there's better options out there. He's only 20 years of age. He's never played in the Premier League before. I think it's a lot of pressure to put on someone and a lot of money to spend on a player like that. I think Nico Williams would be my shout to go left wing if I was looking for someone over him. So look, I think he'd be a good addition. He's a decent player, but to start and be our first choice every week, not for me.
Derek?
Our issue is so many players we need to move on. Sterling, Chilwell, that's millions a month. It's just and Sterling refused point blank to go to the Club World Cup. I don't know contractually. Can he get away with that, or is that? But he's not going next week because they asked him to go along, and he said no. So this is the sort of thing.
More than anything.
Yeah. So
we'll talk about that later on. Yeah, it's
we'll come to that.
Yeah. We'll talk about that near the end. You should have held up to Callum Hudson-Odoi. He'd have done your left wing fine for you.
It wouldn't have done much, he wouldn't have done much worse,
We've
just some of these players seem to blossom when they go away from Chelsea. That's a fact of life. You see guys, well, no matter what it is, they seem to do okay. A lot of them.
Before Paul
in there, Daniel?
He wants to talk about youth. I have one question to the both of you, starting with you, Derek. It's a simple question. Reece James, genius or fraud?
When fit, genius.
Daniel, genius or fraud?
Genius.
Thank you. Okay, fair enough. Paul, sorry.
So we'll summarise with it. Lindelap's done, isn't it?
Yeah, he's signed.
Yeah. Asugo waiting, or is that done?
I think that's
that was
done.
Announced today. I think that's, and there's someone else whose name I forgot. Somebody called Sarr was signed last year, but he's coming from Strasbourg. So there's three kind of younger players that we don't really know an awful lot about how they'll do in the Premier League.
So Mignon, I think he's done as well, isn't he? He's more or less done. Sanchez is linked with West Ham, I think.
Well, the deal
wasn't that down at Kudos with a chat about something Sanchez and somebody else and Kudos coming to Chelsea, but whether it's just talk, it's petered out. You haven't really hear that now.
Yeah, to be honest, after what's happened today, I won't believe anything they put out on social media, any of the stuff the journalists put out there, because for me it's just a lot of nonsense, a lot of PR, a lot of rubbish. I think that we're out for people.
A lot of it's clickbaiting, there's no doubt. So that leads me on then to ask the question. Like, I have great faith in the Forest Youth Academy. We bring in through good players. You're signing a lot of young players. I think you've the youngest average team in the league. Is your youth system, is it working, or do you need? Are you going to continue on with just the youngsters or the team you have, or are you going to try and bring somebody with experience in? And is your youth system working, Derek?
Well, ask Daniel first.
Right, Daniel, is the academy feeding into any players?
Yeah, well, like if you actually look at this season in the Conference League, especially through the league phase and probably up until the quarterfinal, semi-final, I think we played the most academy players, or gave the most debuts to academy players in Europe, I think it was. So there was definitely an opportunity for them to play and to have an opportunity to show themselves on the world stage, well, Conference League equivalent. And some of them took their chance, but if we're being serious, if we want to, we're in the Champions League now. We can't really be afford to, have a starting 11 of 5 or 6 academy players when you're up against the likes of, PSG and Man City and Real Madrid and such and such. So I do think, I do think we need to bring in experience. I think it's crucial. I think if we just keep going with this, like we have good young players like Casado, Palmer. You could even put Cucurella in there. He's only 24, 25. Yep. We have good players in there, but if you're just going to keep having this cycle of bringing in more youth with them, I think you'll just stay stuck in that cycle. I think you need to bring in at least 2 or 3 experienced players to fit in and just automatically make the team better, and not just hope that they'll be better in 5-6 years.
I think you're right. I think it stabilises the dressing room as well if you've got somebody with experience in there to give them a guidance. And I think whenever you hit that lull in the middle of the season, when everybody thought you went off the boil completely, I think that's what was missing. I think you were missing somebody with a bit of experience just to get the dressing room down, you know.
Just to follow what Daniel was saying about the youth, apparently I've been hearing in the last couple of weeks that Maresca's now having more input on players coming in, and he's putting them in the direction of wanting more experience. I think before
he just how that ended with Poch.
He had no say, so apparently now he's getting a bit more, which I'm glad to hear, you know, that he's getting a bit of input, and that is asking directly for a bit of experience to come into the club. So, you know, I'm pleased about that. Whether it's true or not, who knows? But it appears that he's a bit more of an input. So I'm hopeful about that.
I think a lot of weeks ago about it. Was it raise the ages and raise the wages?
Actually, and that was experience in maybe Osherman. Just go that wee bit further for somebody, you know.
See, my experience at Chelsea over the last lot of years has been that a lot of the players who come in were, like, to quote unquote, oven ready. Chelsea bought them in and they were established stars, big money, won the league, won the cup, won whatever it was they're going to win, and maybe moved on, you know. The departure from that, because the Moneyball idea of the stats and bringing in young guys and sell on models and so on is attracting everyone nowadays, you know. I just wonder, do Chelsea fans have the, you know, patience for that, frankly?
I don't really.
Because for me, growing up like your dad, Alan, in the 70s and 80s, you know, that I'm still living the dream now. You know, when we're complaining, I'm starting to remind myself of how bad it was, and we could have lost the club twice, you know, in the 70s, and even with the sanctions there, the club was in dire straits. So I try and, as best as I can, put a bit of perspective on it, you know, to a degree. But you want what's best for your team, and you want them to do it the right way. And progress, it's a bit of progress, really, for me, you know.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, we've talked about the squad there and the depth and the balance. You're probably going to come to that word and tie it into something else. The squad is, particularly ahead of this Club World Cup. And last part first, maybe, do you even care about this Club World Cup? Daniel, I'll start with you on that one. What do you think?
Do I care about it? Yeah, I think whenever you go into a competition, you want to try and win it or certainly compete. So, yeah, like I will watch our games now, the 2 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, no, I will be watching it. I will stay up and watch it. Yeah. I can't help it when they're on. So, yeah, like obviously I think the timing of it and the format change is not ideal right at the end of the season, and kind of as it ends, you're jumping right into pre-season. I don't think it's the best preparation, considering half of the squad are already on internationals at the moment. So it's a lot to play in. And then you look at Liverpool and Arsenal, who are not going, will have had like a full pre-season. Players will have got a longer holiday to rest, recharge. So, you know, will that be advantage to them at the start of the season? We don't know. You know, we'll have to wait and see. But no, like we're in it. I'd like us to win it. But do I think we will? No. But I'd like to see us try and compete anyway.
I've just written down here 47 million. And the 47 million we get to the quarterfinals. So potentially we could play Bayern Munich in the last 16 and PSG in the quarterfinals. If we got that far, that would give a bit of interest. And you got 50 million for it, and nobody's injured. And
surely that can pay off his wages.
We still have 2 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks. That would be that would work. What you don't want is winning the final and Cole Palmer pulling a hamstring and he's out for 3 months. You know that's always in the back of my mind.
I think that's what you're looking at. I think you're literally not getting any break, as you highlighted, Daniel. You've a lot of players away in international duties. You've got them going straight into this, and they'll be coming straight back. And literally, I think it's a couple of weeks before the Premiership starts again. And I can't see when they're talking about players being overplayed at the minute. Anyway, bringing another competition into it. And I think it could damage your season next year. I really do. On that, like, how do you think the squad as it is at the minute? How do you think they're going to cope with this competition against the PSGs, against the Reals? How do you think they're going to go, Derek? Do you want to go first on that one? How do you think?
I think we'll
What's
put
your
up a good
expectations?
chap.
What's your expectations? That's what I'm asking you.
So you told me the Club World Cup, yeah,
Yeah.
or the Champions League,
No. The Club World Cup.
Club World Cup. My expectation, I don't think we'll win it, but it's time, you know, if we make a good run, we should get out of the group of the teams we're playing, and we should get into the last 16 quarter-final. Further than that, it's unlikely, but and it depends what sort of, you know, how seriously PSG, Bayern, Atletico take it as well. You don't know how will they send teams or, you know, fringe players. You know, I think we're all going into the unknown. I don't think anybody really knows that till it starts. Will it catch the imagination, or will it not? Or, you know, there's a lot of that. As Daniel said, 2 o'clock in the morning, 2:45 in the morning, it might just, you know, I mightn't bother. I'm not there, but yeah, I think a lot of the free to air, Daniel, and Channel 5 are showing a lot of the matches.
I think it's on the zone for free, isn't it? I think they just set up like you can put up the zone and just watch
that's
it
right.
for free.
So, you know, I'll certainly be watching. From my pool in Nuria next week, I'll be watching.
I mean, we're asking you both about how you feel. There's a method in the man. It's about your team's participation in this and to what level it whets the appetite versus, for example, the Champions League or the Premiership. Because I suspect that FIFA fans for this, I think they resent the fact that UEFA control the power base of soccer in Europe, and the best players in the world come to Europe. You know what I mean? The Brazilians. You know, we're not even waiting for the Brazilian players to become established in their own country anymore. You know, they're coming out at 16, 17, as you know. The Africans, the Eastern Europeans, you know, all come here early, and the best players come. So what does that mean to a real world scenario where you weaken beds of football and so on and so forth? So I think FIFA are going to try and build this up whereby, particularly the United States, which is a cash cow, they'll go far east, can start to strengthen their own teams. And I think they see this, probably beyond my lifetime, superseding the Euro and being a genuine world championship where teams from Africa, South America, United States, you know, are genuinely very, very strong. And the incentive in those countries to become strong will be this. That's why the money's high, you know. And it's like appearance money in many ways, like a golf tournament for the Chelseas and the cities and all to go there. They'll be required to give a good show. And I think the phenomenon for Chelsea could be that they'll start the season really well because they'll be fit, but it's about November, Christmas, where they could get caught out and run out of steam a bit, you know.
The season just gone,
good luck them. I'm going to watch it. I'm quite intrigued, to be honest. And I hope PSG get punctured.
I have to be honest and say I have zero interest in it, other than Botafogo. We're buying 3 players from them allegedly, and I would like to see how they play. But they probably won't be in it if we are buying them. So,
well, probably be called Botafogo -3.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Thank you, Paul, for that stunning endorsement of the Club World Championship. I'll be the correspondent on it. I will watch it. Yeah.
Good. You can do that. I've zero interest in it. I have to be honest with you. I think it's just
all right. Thank you.
UEFA's way of making more money, more money.
UEFA's way, yeah.
Well,
that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, we'll move on to other subjects now, guys. We appreciate your information on that. Thomas Frank, Colin, do you want to tell us? Are you happy? Are you? How are you feeling about him coming to you? I know it's not done yet, but allegedly it's nearly done.
Let me say, first of all, I don't know that it is done, and I don't want to jump the gun. However, I think he is the candidate. How do I feel? Well, it's hard to just come down to earth a wee bit. I always said, I was on record through this podcast saying that I was a Levy out, Enoch out person, to use the mantra, and I had issues with Ange. And those issues were about the style of play, the inability or the lack of desire to adapt. And I watched, in the first Chelsea game of the season before last, I was at that match when I watched how our players, them being sent off, through frustration at having to adapt. I watched Eric Dyer stand on the halfway line. geez, he's a good player, and Chelsea walked through and scored goals. And in the second game against Chelsea seemed to be our, we went 2 up and then threw it away again. Injuries come in, that thing, Now, what's my point? I think that some of Ange's style contributed to those injuries, frankly. Medical people might tell me not, but I was there, watched what happened, and VAR. And I did it, I think, ironically, when he was more pragmatic in Europe, we saw what we could do. So did I want them out at the end of the day? I really think that if you take the emotion of the cup win out of it, 22 defeats, and the second half of the previous season were abominable. And I have been at a lot of those games. I sat there, having spent a lot of money going to watch them, and it was a hard watch. When you're losing at home to Ipswich, Leicester, you're drawn to Bournemouth. Teams, frankly, you should beat. There are a couple of Indian summers. You had a couple of wins against City, 4 wins against United. But they're the exception that prove the rule. So I can understand why Spurs made the decision they made. Okay. Coming on to Thomas Frank, who's available? Well, you talk about that wee batch of managers, the Frank, Areola, and so on, who are overperforming with their teams. And you think, well, if they had more money or more status, would it be even better? There could be. There's a certain manager of West Ham at the minute who was probably captured like that and was going to kill dead things. And it hasn't just quite happened for his career, in my opinion. So it could go either way. I like Frank. I've seen Brentford, beg your pardon, play live at the ground 3 times. I liked what they did. We came off the best in 2 of them. But I liked how I liked how they played. I liked their use of the forwards. And he's not afraid to defend. He's very pragmatic. So if you were to come to Spurs, I would say, okay, Thomas, let's have a go. Let's go. I also think he interviews well, and he's very unflustered. I think at the end, Ange let it get to him a wee bit. So, yeah, Frank, for me, yeah.
Daniel,
let's be frank.
Daniel, we done a wee special half-hour pod on Friday night, and you were straight in there with a comment, 22 games lost, he has to go.
Yeah. Stand by that.
You stand by it, yeah. But do you not think that having won a European Cup and having got them into the Champions League, is that not enough to sustain them for 10 games at the start of the season?
No, because then they just end up sacking him anyway. So they were going to do it. Then what was the point in waiting just to potentially have yourself in a position that might be irretrievable to then just do it anyway? They were abysmal in the Premier League this year. They were. Yeah. It was nothing short. I've no, there's no feelings lost with Tottenham, but they were a disgrace. Some of the games they played, some of the performances they put in, the league's your bread and butter. And to be if it wasn't for the 3 teams that came up being so poor, and to be honest, they were still championship teams playing in the Premier League, you would have gone down, or Spurs would have gone down. Yeah. And considering they finished 5th the year before, which was respectable, if it was this year, got them the Champions League, that much of a fall off is just, there's a lot of managers that wouldn't have lasted that season to finish 17th, let alone, be able to get, potentially next season. So for me, it was just always he had to go. He was very stubborn. I found some of his media interviews, he was very snarky. He was very kind of, probably too arrogant for the way they were playing at times. And look, I know they won the Europa League, but they played a very poor United team. Bodo Glimt in the semi-final, so
maybe
I accept.
When the Europa League crowded the issue to a degree, I think. If you'd lost to United, there would have been any support for Ange at all. So maybe that there was a bit of that. To a degree, a lot of fans back them.
It's an emotional. When people I think are confusing issues. I'm delighted to win the trophy. I was on the pitch that night. I was over at Tottenham. I was all over the place. It was one of the greatest days of my life. And I've seen Spurs win trophies. I love all, but it's got to be a springboard. It's got to be a catalyst to move forward. And I think the points you're making, Daniel, I totally accept. The reality is, and Derek said, had we lost that match, there would be no debate here. We'll be talking about the new Tottenham manager. So the emotion of the excitement's going in. The thing about getting into the Champions League, in cold light of day, the teams were not dropped down from the Champions League into the Europa League this time. So it did stay a wee bit weaker. I acknowledge that. You can only beat who's in front of you, blah, blah, blah. And I think we did really well to strangle United in the final. What a great feeling that is. But the Champions League was a bit of, I guess, stroke of luck there. It's a wee bit like saying, well, he won the lottery. Why don't we keep him on? Yeah. I like Ange. I enjoyed him. I loved his freshness. But going back to really the Chelsea match of the previous season, when change and new tactics and differences were needed, it wasn't done. We went to Wolves anymore and went 1-up and gave 2 goals away in injury time. And that just saw why can't we close these games off, And I think Spurs need to be more flexible than we were under Ange. That's personal opinion as a fan.
Just reflecting on a couple of things that Daniel said there. I read a stat the other day: 22. No other team has ever lost 22 games and stayed in the Premiership.
There you go.
They've all been relegated if they've lost that amount of games. I think that Ange was getting to the stage that he couldn't handle the press, and I think by luck or the grace of God or whatever you believe in, he managed to pull it off and win a trophy in his second season. Thomas Frank, I'm not so sure. Is he going to go from heroes to zero? Derek, do you think it could be another case of a Graham Potter story when Graham Potter came to you guys?
Could be. To be honest, he's probably the next on that ladder of Premier League managers who he's the next one. Maybe the Bournemouth manager. It's what Silva, but Silva, so if they're looking within the Premier League, he's probably the next one on. Deserves that goal.
Yeah.
He plays with a lot more flexibility and he'll adapt each match. He change it around the way and just seemed to refuse to submit to any until he got to the Europa League final when he got his guys defending for their lives. It was staggering. Why could you not do that during the season? But as a Chelsea fan, we will miss Ange terribly because that's 6 points that were always noted down. So, but no, Thomas Frank deserves to go, and I think he'll do all right. It's a dream start.
What is all right? What does all right mean?
I would say challenge for top 6, not out of the knockout stage, out of the league, whatever it is now, and looking up around. I would be saying. That's probably what Levy's saying to him. This is what we want to be doing now, And he'll say, "Well,
what do you see? What do you see them doing next year, Spurs?"
I think they'll probably finish in the top 10. I think that's probably where they should be looking to at least get to after finishing 17th, and then you can always have a good Champions League run. You can always have a good FA Cup run. You don't necessarily have to have had the best domestic season, but you can still do well in Europe. Although the Champions League is going to be a big jump up from the Europa League, and likewise with us from the Conference League. So, it's not that easy. But to be honest, I think if for the league, they should be aiming to at least get back within the top 8, realistically.
Yeah.
Or 10.
And Colin, the big question: what do you see for your team? How do you see them performing? What do you think? What's your expectations?
I have a funny feeling Spurs are going to surprise people next year and do very well. And Ange may be the guy who set down what might have been. Sometimes it just happens that for somebody else, all the ducks fall into the order. We may have if we have a relatively injury-free season, the money, and build ourselves up and have a good start with a wee bit of confidence, I think we'll do well. Now, for me, I insist that with the Potts years, top 4 is where Spurs really should be and need to be. Okay. Given their credentials and their status, I don't think we'll make that next year. But what I would like to see is a top 5 and another trophy. Yeah.
If you're saying top 4, who's the other 3 teams that's in the top 4 with you?
Manchester City, Liverpool, and Chelsea.
Ooh, no Arsenal.
No Arsenal. No Man United.
No, they'll finish. No. Well, I mean, who do you want in the top four? I mean, from my point of view, I don't. United could be the team that I'm describing Spurs to be, who have a new trajectory next season. I'm just not sure. But United need to bring in the players. I think Tottenham have a lot of good players there who need to stay injury free. And I think if their back five function well and play as a back five like they did occasionally, they're hard to beat. I think we need a leader in midfield, a holding midfielder, a good top man who runs the show, and we do need another forward. I think we've a number of forwards and cut in from the wing forwards and so on. But I think with someone who knows where the net is, what could be real. I think Solanke's done great, like somebody maybe with him or occasionally instead of him to put the ball in the net. I don't have any names in mind at the minute because I really need to see who the manager is. Because obviously if Frank comes in, that loads the dice towards some people who are currently in red and white stripes. So we'll wait and see how that pans out. Yeah.
Just we're not subject to a wee bit. Just 2 or 3 words from each of you. And Derek, we'll start with you. Where do United finish next year, and how do they do next year?
They finish 8th. They finish 8th. They finish in the top half comfortably, and that'll be it. We'll not win any trophies.
Daniel,
I agree with Derek. I think the same. Anywhere I think comfortably top half, and probably they might go on a cup run, but I don't think they'll win anything either.
Yeah, Colin, you're something similar, so I take it.
Probably, yeah. I mean, United were one of the teams that I was ABU when I was young, so it's hard to be objective. But I think there's still a fair bit of work to do. Yeah.
Yeah, and an interesting conversation, and Kevin that come on for contribute about the Man United as a Man United supporter. He says where Man United are going wrong, they don't buy Premiership players. They don't buy from the Premiership like Arsenal do, like other teams do. They don't buy a player that's already established themselves in the Premiership. I gave it a bit of thought, and I think he's right. I think he is right. But we'll wait and see. I don't know how this manager's going to do. It'd be interesting to see. It could either be, as the man says, shit or bust. It could be. It could do okay, or it could actually just go absolutely upside down on them.
Yeah.
We'll just have to wait and see. Anyway, guys, the last subject we'll have. Go on, Colin.
Yes, one final subject. Last couple of minutes, guys. Bear with us, Mr. Galt. Very quickly, Nottingham Forest's behaviour towards Crystal Palace with regards to attendance in the Europa League next year. Palace, everyone's FA Cup winners. What a story, or is it what a story ruined?
Well, I say
react.
I'm actually split down the middle in this, and I think leave Crystal Palace alone. Leave them be. They've earned their place in the Europa League. It's one of these fairy tale stories, and I believe that you should leave them alone. But rules are rules, and at the end of the day, the rules state no individual. I think I've done a banner for it today as well. It's dead simple. Like, that's the rules there. Multi-club ownership, no individual or legal entity may have control or decisive influence over more than one club in the same competition. So Forrest took action. He put his funds, his shares into a blind fund in preparation for going to Champions League, which Chelsea denied us, and rightly so on the last day of the season. So do I think they should be put out of it? I really am divided on it. I think that rules are rules, and they should have planned for it. But at the same time, like he owns more than 2 clubs. So how's he going to sell 200 million worth of 43% of Crystal Palace is estimated at 200 million? How's he going to sell that before the start of the competition? And I think that's the only way that you really should be allowed to proceed, is if he is allowed to sell his shares and move on and have no duplex interest in the competition. What do you think about it? I will say I'm uncomfortable with Forest writing to UEFA. I think they should have stayed out of it. I really do think they should have stayed out of it.
I agree with that. It looks bad. An opportunism, a bit of opportunism. You know, they're already in the Conference League, which is a good win. So why not just leave it at that? You know.
Yeah.
And
I think that's a sour taste, I suppose. You know, I mean, reading about it and what little I understand, I think it's a matter of time, and there was a way around this. But I think Chris needed to have done this in March at the latest, and at that time, I don't think anyone, including the most fervent Palace supporter, foresaw them winning the FA Cup. You know,
No.
So I think that was the problem.
Especially up against who they're up against.
We could win this, you know. And that's
perhaps
probably
Daniel, we had the same issue with Strasbourg, isn't that right? There was something Strasbourg potentially could have got into the Champions League, and there was some talk a few months ago that Chelsea needed to do something. I'm not sure quite what was going to pan out. There was mention of, you know, the old Daily Mail story, Chelsea will go thrown out of the Champions League, you know. If you want to find something that's not true about Chelsea, read the Daily Mail. Martin Ziegler, he's a prime bullshit artist. Sorry, Martin, if you're watching.
Right. I hope you're using your own solicitor.
Well, how do you think it's going to pan out, guys? How do you think Palace will be allowed to stay in it, or Daniel? What do you think?
To be honest, I think they will end up finding a way to stay in it. I think they'll come to some sort of agreement. They have until the end of the month, I think I heard. So I think they'll come to something. If Man City and Girona could have played in the Champions League at the same time,
right? That's right.
Can't be done as well.
Yeah,
I think they'll be kicked out. Maybe they could find a way to swap places with Forest. They go into the conference and Forest into the youth league.
They can't call it because they're other. They have another
Conference League as well.
The sickening feeling I have is, had this have been Real Madrid or PSG or Liverpool or something, would there have been an issue? You know, but who knows? But we'll see. We'll see. Talking points to come.
Okay, guys.
Okay, that's me.
Yep, that's us, guys. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Derek, once again.
Thanks again, guys. Really enjoyed it.
We finish up.
And Chelsea are always excited for them, you know.
Yeah, Daniel, thanks for joining us. Very informative, and we'll look forward to having you on again. Anything you want to add before we finish up, mate?
Thanks a million for having me, guys. I really enjoyed that.
Oh, good crack.
Great
Thanks
fun.
very much. Thank you.
Love to come on again.
See you soon.
Okay, Colin, you want to add before we finish up?
Yeah. No, just say looking forward to next week and seeing what happens. And Paul, you'll be able to fill us in on the World Club Championship of the sound of things. Not.
I look forward to you telling me how it's going. I won't be sitting up to 2 o'clock in the morning to
Don't
watch
worry. I remember sitting up. I remember last story. It was actually at the Blue Mountain in Australia, lying badly on my elbow to keep myself awake to watch Spurs lose to Aston Villa at 4 o'clock in the morning. It's coming over live from England. The one terrible game away lots of years ago. Eddie King was playing, you know. So staying up to 2 o'clock. Maybe we'll see what happens. Probably go to bed and wake up again by 2 o'clock, you know.
Yeah,
okay, guys, thank you very much.
Okay, guys, thanks very much. What I'll do is I'll put a post up this week. We'll maybe do something about transfer markets, and we'll maybe skip a week, I don't know. But throw in any comments you have. Please like the channel and share it with friends or people who might be interested. Thanks very much, Daniel, Derek, and Colin. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks very much, guys. Take care.